More than 200 years ago, there were no states. There was no United States. Instead, the land we now call America was made up of 13 British colonies. These colonies were controlled by the King of England, who lived across the ocean. He made laws, collected taxes, and rarely listened to the voices of the people living in the colonies. One day, the colonists said enough was enough. They wanted to be free. And so this is how the United States began. It's me. Welcome to my channel. Let's go back to the beginning. In the early days, the land we know as the United States was home to thousands of different tribes and nations of people. Then came the Europeans. They crossed the ocean from faraway lands, and they began exploring and claiming parts of the land for their countries. Soon, many Europeans settled here and built their homes. They wanted to be close to the ocean so they could trade with other countries. But there weren't any big cities. Instead, there were small villages along the coast where traders and explorers could rest between voyages. Then the Europeans began exploring farther inland. They found rivers and streams that flowed like golden ribbons through forests of tall trees and across plains full of wild animals. Soon, more people came to live in the area. Some were looking for adventure or a better life. Causes. Others had been sent as punishment for breaking the law. And others still were simply lost at sea and washed ashore in this new world. As more people came to North America, the King of England became very excited. He realized that the land was full of resources that could make him and his country very rich. That's when he decided to take control of the area. In fact, he drew a line across the continent and divided the land into two sections. Everything to the west of the line, he said, belongs to me. Everything to the east of the line, he said, belongs to the colonies. And with that, the king sent people to collect taxes from those living in the colonies and make sure they followed the laws he created. The colonists didn't like this arrangement much, but they had no say in the matter. If they didn't follow the king's laws, they would be punished. In fact, if they disobeyed, they would lose everything they owned and be thrown into prison. The king also required the colonists to house British soldiers in their homes and feed them the best food they had. But despite all the rules, most of the colonists were happy to be free of the old life they had known in Europe. They could own their own land and earn a decent living farming, fishing, or trading. Also, because the king was so far away, the colonists largely governed themselves. Each colony had its own assembly of elected officials who passed laws and collected taxes for the good of the community. But soon, the king decided he wanted more money. The 7 Years' War was raging in Europe, and the king needed more money to pay his soldiers. That's when he decided to tighten his control over the colonies and collect more taxes. The colonists protested, saying they shouldn't have to pay taxes to a king they couldn't even see, but the king would not listen. He sent soldiers to guard the harbors and keep the colonists from trading. He even hired German mercenaries to put down rebellion, and the colonists had enough. They knew they couldn't win a war against the king, so they began planning a revolt. A group of colonists met in secret and signed the Declaration of Independence. With this document, they declared that they would no longer be ruled by the king. They were free. The king was furious and sent soldiers to capture the leaders and put down the rebellion. And so the American Revolutionary War began. For 8 years, soldiers fought across the land. Battles were fought in forests and on open fields. Men marched for miles carrying supplies and ammunition on their backs. Soldiers slept in the snow, and some froze to death before reaching their destination. But slowly, the colonists won the support of other countries who didn't like the king's bullying. Eventually, France agreed to help them fight, and with that, the tide of the war turned. At Yorktown, Virginia, British General Cornwallis surrendered to American General George Washington. The war was over, and the colonists had won. Now, though, they had to figure out how to run a country. To do this, they met together at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. There, delegates from each state argued about how things should be organized. Should the new country be ruled by a king like the old one? Should there be elected officials or maybe a parliament? Should all the states be equal? Or should some states have more power than others? After much debate, the delegates agreed on a plan. They wrote down the rules in a new document called the Constitution. And with that, the United States of America was born. This new country looked very different from any other country in the world. For one thing, it was built on the idea that all people are created equal and have the right to rule themselves. To protect this freedom, the Constitution divided the government into 3 branches. The first branch was led by the president, who would enforce the laws of the land. The second branch was called Congress, which would make the laws, and the third branch was the court system, which would interpret the laws. The Constitution also guaranteed basic rights to the citizens of the new country, including the right to speak, to worship as they pleased, to own property, and to vote. But as the country grew, new problems arose. The first problem was slavery. When the Constitution was written, many people still owned slaves. Even though the delegates argued for hours about what to do about slavery, they couldn't agree on a solution. So they decided to leave the question of slavery up to the individual states. That meant some states would allow slavery, while other states would not. Over time, this caused great pain and suffering for the people of the United States. Another problem was that not all people could vote. Only white male property owners could vote, which meant African Americans. Women and Native Americans could not have a say in the government. Finally, another problem was the size of the country. As more people moved to the United States, the country grew larger. But the Constitution had only provided for 9 states. Now, there were 13 states, and the government didn't know how to handle all the differences. Despite these challenges, the United States began to grow and prosper. People came from all over the world to visit the land of freedom. They brought with them new ideas and ways of doing things that helped the country grow. They also brought with them stories of the beauty and opportunity that awaited them in the United States. And so the country grew, step by step, person by person, dream by dream. Today, the United States is one of the most powerful and diverse countries in the world. Its influence can be felt across the globe, and its people continue to push the boundaries of what is possible. But it all started with a simple idea that people should be free to rule themselves. I've always been fascinated by the story of how our country was built. I mean, can you imagine what it must have been like to be one of those colonists who met in secret and then bravely fought for freedom? Or to be one of the delegates who gathered at the Constitutional Convention and had to figure out how to create a new way of governing a country? The courage and determination of the people who came before us is truly inspiring. It reminds me that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when they work together toward a common goal. And that's why I think it's so important to learn about the history of our country. We should remember the struggles and sacrifices of those who came before us, so that we can carry on their legacy and make our country even better. So what do you think? What's your favorite part of the story of how the United States began? And what do you think it means for us today? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe so you never miss an episode of my channel. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.